Section 7, The Handy Cyclopedia of Things Worth Knowing. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by David Dunabeer. The Handy Cyclopedia of Things Worth Knowing by Joseph Trenins, published in 1911, Section 7. The Single Tax. This idea was first formulated by Mr. Henry George in 1879 and has grown steadily in favor. Single tax men assert as a fundamental principle that all men are equally entitled to the use of the earth, therefore no one should be allowed to hold valuable land without paying to the community the value of the privilege. They hold that this is the only rightful source of public revenue, and they would therefore abolish all taxation, local, state, and national, except a tax upon the rental value of land exclusive of its improvements. The revenue thus raised to be divided among local, state, and general governments, as the revenue from certain direct taxes is now divided between local and state governments. The single tax would not fall on all land, but only on valuable land, and on that in proportion to its value. It would thus be a tax not on use or improvements, but on ownership of land, taking what would otherwise go to the landlord as owner. In accordance with the principle that all men are equally entitled to the use of the earth, they would solve the transportation problem by public ownership and control of all highways, including the roadbeds of railroads, leaving their use equally free to all. The single tax system would, they claim, dispense with a horde of tax gatherers, simplify government, and greatly reduce its cost. Give us with all the world that absolute free trade which now exists between the states of the Union. Abolish all taxes on private issues of money, take the weight of taxation from agricultural districts where land has little or no value apart from improvements, and put it upon valuable land, such as city lots and mineral deposits. It would call upon men to contribute for public expenses in proportion to the natural opportunities they monopolize, and make it unprofitable for speculators to hold land unused or only partly used, thus opening to labor unlimited fields of employment, solving the labor problem and abolishing involuntary poverty. The Mysteries of Hypnotism. A compend of the general claims made by professional hypnotists. Animal magnetism is the nerve force of all human and animal bodies, and is common to every person in a greater or less degree. It may be transmitted from one person to another. The transmitting force is the concentrated effort of willpower, which sends the magnetic current through the nerves of the operator to the different parts of the body of his subject. It may be transmitted by and through the eyes, as well as the fingertips, and the application of the whole open hands to different regions of the bodies of the subject, as well as to the mind. The effect of this force upon the subject will depend very much upon the health, mental capacity, and general character of the operator. Its action, in general, should be soothing and quieting upon the nervous system, stimulating to the circulation of the blood, the brain, and other vital organs of the body of the subject. It is the use and application of this power or force that constitutes hypnotism. Magnetism is a quality that inheres in every human being, and it may be cultivated like any other physical or mental force of which men and women are constituted. From the intelligent operator using it to overcome disease, a patient experiences a soothing influence that causes a relaxation of the muscles, followed by a pleasant, drowsy feeling which soon terminates in refreshing sleep. On waking, the patient feels rested, all his troubles have vanished from consciousness, and he is as if he had a new lease on life. In the true hypnotic condition, when a patient voluntarily submits to the operator, any attempt to make suggestions against the interests of the patient can invariably be frustrated by the patient. Self-preservation is the first law of nature, and some of the best-known operators who have recorded their experiments assert that suggestions not in accord with the best interest of the patient could not be carried out. No one was ever induced to commit any crime under hypnosis that could not have been induced to do the same thing much easier without hypnosis. The hypnotic state is a condition of mind that extends from a comparatively wakeful state with slight drowsiness to complete somnambulism, no two subjects as a rule ever presenting the same characteristics. The operator, to be successful, must have control of his own mind, be in perfect health, and have the ability to keep his mind concentrated upon the object he desires to accomplish with his subject. How to Care for a Piano by William H. Damon. The most important thing in the preservation of a piano is to avoid atmospheric changes and extremes and sudden changes of temperature. Where the summer condition of the atmosphere is damp, all precautions possible should be taken to avoid an entirely dry condition in winter, such as that given by steam or furnace heat. In all cases, should the air in the home contain moisture enough to permit a heavy frost on the windows in zero weather. The absence of frost under such conditions is positive proof of an entirely dry atmosphere, and this is the piano's most dangerous enemy, causing the sounding board to crack, shrinking up the bridges, and consequently putting the piano seriously out of tune, also causing an undue dryness in all the action parts and often a loosening of the glue joints, thus producing clicks and rattles. To obviate this difficulty is by no means an easy task and will require considerable attention. Permit all the fresh air possible during the winter, being careful to keep the piano out of cold drafts, as this will cause sudden contraction of the varnish and cause it to check and crack. Plants in the room are desirable, and vessels of water of any kind will be of assistance. The most potent means of avoiding extreme dryness is to place a single loaf bread pan, half full of water, in the lower part of the piano, taking out the lower panel and placing it on either side of the pedals inside. This should be refilled about once a month during the artificial heat, care being taken to remove the vessel as soon as the heat is discontinued in the spring. In cases where a stove heat is used, these precautions are not necessary. The action of a piano, like any other delicate piece of machinery, should be carefully examined and, if necessary, adjusted each time it is tuned. The hammers need occasional and careful attention to preserve original tone quality and elasticity. Never allow the piano to be beaten or played hard upon. This is ruinous to both the action and tuning. When not in use, the music rack and top should be closed to exclude dust. The keyboard need never be closed, as the ivory needs both light and ventilation and will eventually turn yellow unless left open. The case demands careful treatment to preserve its beauty and polish. Never use anything other than a soft piece of cotton cloth or cheesecloth to dust it with. Never wipe it with a dry chamois skin or silk cloth. Silk is not as soft as cotton and will scratch. A dry chamois skin picks up the dust and grit and gradually scours off the fine finish. In dusting, never use a feather duster, nor rub the piano hard with anything. The dust should be whipped off and not rubbed into the varnish. If the piano is dingy, smoky, or dirty looking, it should be washed carefully with lukewarm water, with a little ammonia in it to soften it. Never use soap. Use nothing but a small, soft sponge and a chamois skin. Wipe over a small part at a time with the sponge, following quickly with the wet chamois skin wrung out of the same water. This will dry it immediately and leave it as beautiful and clean as new. Never use patent polishes. If your piano needs polishing, employ a competent polisher to give it a hand-rubbing friction polish. The highest mountain on the globe is not, as is generally supposed, Mount Everest. That honor belongs to a lofty peak named Mount Hercules on the Isle of Papua New Guinea, discovered by Captain Lawson in 1881. According to Lawson, this monster is 32,763 feet in height, being 3,781 feet higher than Mount Everest, which is only 29,002 feet above the level of the Indian Ocean. Transcriber's note: the highest point in New Guinea is Puncak Jaya, Mount Karstens, or the Karstens Pyramid, at 16,023 feet. Salt rising bread. The real formula for making salt rising bread, as set down by the daughter of Governor Stubbs of Kansas, and by him communicated to Theodore Roosevelt, is as follows, according to the Saturday Evening Post. On the night before you contemplate this masterpiece of baking, take a half a cupful of cornmeal and a pinch of salt and sugar. Scald this with new milk heated to the boiling point and mix to the thickness of mush. This can be made in a cup. Wrap in a clean cloth and put in a warm place overnight. In the morning, when all is ready, take a 1-gallon stone jar and into this put 1 scant cupful of new milk. Add a level teaspoonful of salt and 1 of sugar. Scald this with 3 cupfuls of water heated to the boiling point. Reduce to a temperature of 108 degrees with cold water, using a milk thermometer to enable you to get exactly the right temperature. Then add flour and mix to a good batter. After the batter is made, mix in with your starter that was made the night before. Cover the stone jar with a plate and put the jar into a large kettle of water and keep this water at a temperature of 108 degrees until the sponge rises. It should rise at least 1.5 inches. When it has raised, mix to a stiff dough, make into loaves, and put into pans. Do not let the heat get out of the dough while working. Grease the loaves well on top and set your bread where it will be warm and rise. After the loaves rise, bake in a medium oven for 1 hour and 10 minutes. When you take the loaves from the oven, wrap them in a bread cloth. A cure for love. Take 12 ounces of dislike, 1 pound of resolution, 2 grains of common sense, 2 ounces of experience, a large sprig of thyme, and 3 quarts of cooling water of consideration. Set them over a gentle fire of love, sweeten it with sugar of forgetfulness, skim it with the spoon of melancholy, put it in the bottom of your heart, cork it with the cork of clean conscience. Let it remain, and you will quickly find ease and be restored to your senses again. These things can be had of the apothecary at the House of Understanding, next door to Reason, on Prudence Street. End of section 7.